truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Monday, September 23rd, 2024, the 1,342nd day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening through a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month. And in doing so, you will get the ad-free experience. You'll be able to participate in the conversation over on Substack, and you'll be invited to the interactive live stream every Wednesday afternoon. And if you can't or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the free version on Substack, a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin. And you feel better about precious metals? I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company. And that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. So there's two things I want to cover quickly and then get into the rest of what I want to talk about. The first is this Ryan Routh letter that came out today. The DOJ has released a letter reportedly obtained from a quote-unquote witness who says they received it inside a box delivered to them by Routh several months ago. And apparently in that box was a handwritten letter that reads, "Dear World, This was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I am so sorry I failed you. I tried my best and gave it all the gumption I could muster. It is up to you now to finish the job, and I will offer $150,000 to whomever can complete the job. Everyone across the globe, from the youngest to the oldest, know that Trump is unfit to be anything, much less a U.S. president. U.S. presidents must, at bare minimum, embody the moral fabric that is America and be kind, caring, and selfless and always stand for himself. Trump fails to understand any of, and I guess it goes on, but that's the page that has been released. So, according to an attempted assassin, Trump did not have the moral character to be president. Very sad. There was some concern this morning that the Department of Justice is publishing this to encourage other people to take shots at Trump, knowing that there is a financial reward attached potentially. And while we are beginning to enter into the realm of the ridiculous, I guess we might as well get every potential angle down on the record, probably because it's going to come up in the future as an issue that needs settled in real time or as a kind of reenactment of something that played out in the past. A lot of people suspect, and I would be one of those people, that there have been a great many attempts on Donald Trump's life over the last 9 years. And these stories, as we watch them play out, give us insight into what that effort was actually like. The idea that Donald Trump is somehow short on security is preposterous. I have no doubt that Donald Trump is well protected. Also, that story falls a little flat because how is someone going to get this money from Ryan Routh? Also, isn't he supposed to be broke? Is this just an announcement that there's a pot of gold somewhere for whoever goes out and finds it? I don't know. But as I said, this story seems like it's wandering off into the realm of the absurd. And for the rest of my thoughts on it, I would refer you to the episode last Monday where I discussed it at length. We are now 9 days in with almost no new information. Pictures of a gun, reports of this letter. These are essentially additional unnecessary details on top of things we already knew. We're in roughly that same place with the July 13th assassination event, and that was almost 2.5 months ago. And so let's turn to the discovery of a new fake White House down the street from the real fake White House. This is the Associated Press today. Tourists can finally visit the Oval Office. A replica is opening near the White House on Monday. Washington is getting a new tourist stop that offers visitors the next best thing to being in the Oval Office. An identical replica of President Joe Biden's office, right down to his desk, the armchairs in front of the fireplace, and the weathered family Bible resting on a side table. Yep, they made a replica weathered family Bible to put on the side table. And when Biden's successor takes office next year, the full-scale replica Oval Office at the People's House, a White House experience, will be redecorated to look exactly like the new president's office, said Stuart McLaurin, president of the White House Historical Association, which is opening the doors of its technology-driven education center to the public on Monday. So, you know me, I'm a conspiracy theorist. This sounds a hell of a lot like Joe Biden's not going to be making any more White House Oval Office speeches, and we're going to need a new set for Kamala in the future. So we got to put in that whole redecoration thing. This isn't just going to be like a standard Oval Office. We're going to keep updating this office each season when the new roster comes out. And that is a joke about sports video games. If anyone's ever played sports video games, you know what they do. Each year they release a new version of the game that is exactly the same as the old version of the game, except with different names of the players. Give us $70 and we will change the words on their virtual jerseys. I got to tell you, I kind of think they're just going to close this whole White House experience down when Donald Trump is back. But let's continue. A separate space in the center called the Immersive Theater uses technology to transform into some of the more notable rooms in the White House every 5 minutes. Isn't that amazing? They have a room that they can make look like every other room in the real fake White House. The real White House is in South Palm Beach and sometimes at Bedminster. A terrific thing about this Oval Office, unlike the current Oval Office, is if you're visiting us, you can come and you can sit in this chair and be the President of the United States, McLaurin said, talking about the desk chair as he led the Associated Press on a tour of the center before Monday's opening. Hey, that's just like the real fake White House. You can just come in and you can sit in the chair and be President of the United States. Few people ever set foot in the Oval Office. Yeah, even fewer during the fake President Joe Biden's term. It's like they're just telling us. It is not on the White House public tour route, but at, quote unquote, the People's House. Not only will visitors get to see what one of the most famous offices in the world looks like, they can experience it too. You can take a call from Mr. Putin or anybody you'd like to receive a call from. Have your photo taken there. McLaurin said, you can sit on the sofas or in the president's chair as you've visualized him sitting there, and you can see him on the news talking with a visitor or a head of state. You can do the same thing right there in front of the fireplace. Wow, I can do the same thing that Joe Biden can do in this room where we both do it, and definitely not in the real fake White House, and definitely not in the real White House. The wallpapers, draperies, rug, furniture, paintings, and other artwork are exact replicas of the furnishings as they currently are in the Oval Office. The plan is to change the decor with each future president. It's exactly like President Biden's. Exactly, McLaurin said. Even the family Bible with the weathered elements are duplicated, except for the digital column in the center of the room that shows visitors how the physical office has evolved throughout the presidency. It also turns into a mirror so visitors can see themselves standing in the Oval Office. And the rest of the time, it is a fully functional movie camera. And of course, none of this is anything new. Joe Biden's entire fake presidency has been the product of fakery. We've seen him with green screens before. They didn't even hide that they built a fake White House set across the street at the Eisenhower Executive Office building. You can find all sorts of fact checks on this stuff online. They're all disputing how people said that the fake White House set was the West Wing set or down at Tyler Perry's studios. There were all sorts of rumors back then. Maybe we'll find something out in the future. But they legitimately built a fake White House set across the street and used it all the time for video conferences throughout the first couple years of Joe Biden's fake presidency. They just had him back there a week or two ago to sign some paper on a little tiny desk. And this is one of those moments where I say they're trying to make it obvious and people will not accept it. It's just too crazy. You can't believe it until the TV tells you. Well, we know where that gets us. Now, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it, and that's fine. I know it's kind of a lot, particularly for people who are still attached to believing that we landed on the moon in a spacecraft made of tin foil and shower rods. But you definitely have to stop worrying about looking stupid in front of people who wore 2 masks in their car and pretended that Joe Biden received 81 million real, lawful American votes. Maybe those commies are redeemable someday, and I'm sure they know some things that you might not, but you can't feel stupid in front of those people ever again. It should not be possible. And therefore, it's your duty to yourself, and you could argue to humanity, to actually say what you see and say what you think rather than waiting for someone who knows to tell you. Because as we have seen over and over and over again, the people who know don't know. In fact, most of the time, they're just lying on behalf of people who they assume know things and also don't know things. Technology is used to transform the immersive theater every 5 minutes into each of the 5 rooms of the White House state floor: the East Room, the Red, Blue, and Green rooms, and the State Dining Room. Images on the walls in each room were chosen by the association's historians. Visitors can touch the walls to unlock information about the art, furniture, or other history that happened there. We want people to feel that they are in that room of the White House, McLaurin said. Leaving the theater, visitors will walk to the replica Oval Office along a stone path resembling the White House colonnade, with a view of art made to represent the Rose Garden. Man, they really created every scene you could possibly film at the White House. What a strange project. I bet they're delivering a very immersive experience. Another exhibit shows how presidents use the White House for work, family, and social functions. Visitors can attend cabinet meetings and vote on a course of action for the president, sit at a table set as it would be for a state dinner, to learn how presidents use these glitzy events to conduct diplomacy, or settle into a seat in the family movie theater. In a separate gallery, the head groundskeeper, florist, lead military aide, and chief usher are among White House staff members featured on a video explaining what they do. After entering the Education Center, visitors will come upon a large model of the south side of the White House, listen to an audio greeting from First Lady Jill Biden, and watch an orientation film narrated by Martin Sheen, who played a president on television's The West Wing. And you might remember a couple years back from Jen Psaki's time as the fake president's fake press secretary, she was basically just doing West Wing episodes up there. She had catchphrases that were said on that show. The reporting was that everyone in the fake administration was a huge fan of West Wing. And they carried on like that because West Wing presented the president and his cabinet as flawed but supremely competent people who always, no matter what, wanted what was best for the country in the most morally pure way you can imagine it, which is exactly what we were presented by the fake president Joe Biden and this farce that we have watched play out for the last nearly 4 years now. The back side of the model looks like a dollhouse, exposing cutaways of the ground, state, and residence room floors. Visitors can tap electronic kiosks to learn more about the rooms. The Education Center covers 3 floors of an office building at 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue, 1 block from the White House. And they're talking about the real fake White House. Technology is used throughout to help teach the history of the executive mansion, the presidents and the families who have lived there, and the staff whose work keeps it functioning in its multiple roles as a workplace, a residence, and a museum. McLaurin said the center was designed to be an enhancement to the White House public tour, not a replacement. But with White House tour tickets hard to get, he expects, quote, the vast majority of people who have the opportunity to visit here will not have the privilege to visit the White House itself, end quote. And speaking of people who don't have the opportunity to visit the real White House, Jill Biden visited twice during construction and has planned an event on the White House lawn on Saturday to celebrate next week's opening. This new immersive education center will take visitors on an incredible journey using technology and innovation to bring White House history to life, said the First Lady, a community college professor. Especially as an educator, I'm so excited to see it opening to the public. And the article goes on. And listen, I am just kidding about Jill Biden not being able to visit the real fake White House. I mean, we know that she and Joe don't live there and never have. And they're basically never seen there, although sometimes outside. But wait, what am I talking about? Jill Biden actually just attended Joe Biden's first cabinet meeting in almost a year. And she sat at the head of the table. Joe Biden even sent it down to her so that she could handle the business. Now, I know, all of this is crazy. Joe Biden definitely was a real president who had full access to the White House and used it the whole time. I mean, except when he didn't, because he didn't live there. They built a fake White House set across the street at the Eisenhower Executive Office Building. And now they have turned a fully functioning set of the entire White House and its grounds into a museum open to the public. But I know, I'm the crazy one. All of this is going just a little too far. And by the way, for the listeners out there who may be a little more normie or maybe newer to the show, if you are still closed-minded to these possibilities, you are doing it wrong. That is not being awake. The black hat psyop meant to make truthers look stupid is when truthers say, no, don't look at that. That's a black hat psyop to make people look stupid. Virtually no one even believes Joe Biden is president anymore. And because there was virtually no uproar about that as people accepted it, that means they already knew. How did they already know? Because Joe Biden's been illegitimate the whole time, and they knew from the beginning, as I've been saying now, for 4 years. Everyone knows Joe Biden did not receive 81 million real lawful American votes. And then you can go from there. Some people think that it's all acceptable because Donald Trump was so dangerous. Some people say that every election has fraud. But there's no evidence that it was widespread fraud enough to have changed the outcome of the election. Someone should ask those people how much election fraud is acceptable and why they're ready to have another election knowing that happens. People believe that's a very rational answer to give. It's not rational. That is treasonous. They're saying it's okay to steal elections so long as they get their preference. Which is why it's important for us to understand that no matter what the television tells us on November 6th of this year, the election is illegitimate to the extent one happens. It would be illegitimate. And every American should demand a full review of it right away. That's not a partisan thing. That's not because I'm a Trump supporter. It's because I know about what our elections are. Our elections are fake. They cannot produce legitimacy, and therefore they cannot produce people who govern with the consent of the governed. That is treason. Other people make excuses on the courts or what various Republican officials said. All of them know Joe Biden did not receive 81 million real lawful American votes. They know he's never been a legitimate president. They just put their eggs in that basket and figured they could ride it out. Joe Biden was just put aside. They told him, go to the beach for 3 weeks, and when you come back, try not to do anything stupid. And people are fine with this because they're fine with the global regime and the bureaucratic state running everything in the first place. They're statists. Maybe they're brainwashed. Maybe they're just conditioned into these terrible beliefs. But politically speaking, they are brain-dead communist automatons. They are a dream society for totalitarian rulers. And we will have totalitarian rulers until people wake up and understand what's been done in our names, and how we have been deceived. Because of the inversion, we've been taught to believe that the totalitarian state is run by a dictator, some charismatic individual that captures the hearts and the minds of the people and sets them toward a terrible cause using that populism for power. Totalitarianism is when a bunch of bureaucratic statists systematically oppress everyone and no one really cares because they're too dependent on the system to ever object. They're not able to think for themselves, and the ones who are too scared to do it. And this is what we have. People accept that there is a fake president, and if Kamala Harris is announced by the TV as the winner, people would accept that too. Not enough people, mind you. But that dwindling minority of Trump haters certainly would. But I guess the question to think about all these subjects that the gatekeepers put their walls up in front of, whether it's the fakeness of Joe Biden's presidency or the non-existence of things like nukes or viruses, to people who believe that we're not on a spinning ball rotating around a giant flaming ball 93,000 miles away in the midst of a black infinite void. And I know the feeling. I have the feeling all the time because I'm one of those people that says all the things that other people don't want to hear and don't want to think about. You're worried that people are going to think you're dumb or make fun of you or maybe try to harm your reputation by telling other people you're dumb. Maybe cost you a job or a relationship or your closeness to your friend group. All of a sudden, you're the crazy one, and you're always going to be the crazy one. Unless you happen to be right. Because if you happen to be right about one of those things and everyone else is denying what is right in front of their eyes because they've been told that it's some other way and they are committed to protecting that belief, who's the dumb one? What's the black hat psyop to make people look stupid? Masks were a black hat psyop to make people look stupid. And they convinced those people to willingly inject themselves with a toxic experimental substance that can't protect them from a disease that couldn't kill them because they were told they'd get in trouble if they didn't. They were going to have their treats taken away. If you are preventing yourself from exploring ideas based on how those people are going to talk about you, you're kind of missing the boat. My friend Burning Bright mentions this often. One day I actually will write it, but I started a piece a long time ago called The Joy of Having Been Wrong. As soon as you admit that maybe you don't know the thing you're certain you know, you have the opportunity to find out what you're wrong about. You can't do it unless you admit that you might be wrong and try to prove another point of view. See if there is actually something there rather than working to disprove that thing. Because when you're working to disprove those claims, the ones that aren't protected by authority, what you're going to find is a bunch of elaborate fact checks and debunks. And sooner or later, you'll think that the number of them and the sense they must make means that this crazy theory actually has been disproven. But if you search with an open mind, you'll find out, no, actually, that's wrong. None of that crap has ever been proven. Not by anyone. It doesn't matter how many scientists there are involved with it. It doesn't matter how much anyone believes it. Which is not to say I know that it's all wrong. I'm just saying none of it's been proven. And if you feel like it has, I suggest you look at it more with an open mind. And if you still feel like it has, all good. People have different standards of proof. I just usually increase my standards of proof when I'm dealing with subjects where the official authorities are historically known liars. But I know it's easier to defer to authority, and then if it turns out that they're wrong, making you wrong, well, it's their fault. Like when Ben Shapiro said, my wife is a doctor, you should all take vaccines, and then later said, you see, I'm Jewish, so I've been taught to trust authority and experts and defer to them in every case. My wife being a doctor and all of these other experts saying that the vaccines were good, I just listened to them and it turned out they were wrong. And by the way, if you think I'm misrepresenting Ben Shapiro, that's literally what he said. He said he was raised in a religious tradition where you defer to the experts, aka delegate your thinking to someone else and the moral responsibility. Do as you're told and everything will be just fine. In fact, do as you're told and support the cause, and we will make you fantastically wealthy for absolutely obliterating 19-year-old gender studies majors. I listened to the recent episode of Shawn Ryan's podcast with Mike Benz, and I would strongly encourage everyone to listen to it. It's about 2.5 hours long. It's excellent. Mike Benz is so good with the intricate details of situations that we've been discussing for years. Benz has a deep knowledge of this stuff, and I have so far nothing but good things to say about the guy. Aside from him being kind of an obvious op, he will tell his interviewer, I'm not really here to talk about those things. I'm just focused on free speech. Or I'm not here to judge the good and bad. I'm just telling you what I know. And all good. He is extremely effective and he's getting an important message out on big channels. And he strikes me as a lovely guy. But as good as this podcast is, and as much as I think it is the furthest anyone has gone on a mainstream podcast, it is still just a fraction of the way to where Badlands has been for years. And also, to be fair, to where Mike Benz has been for years. I clipped a number of segments from the show, and those are up in my Telegram feed, t.me/veryreasonable. If you want to hear more, you can go check them out there. He had one clip where he talked about how Ron DeSantis was not attacked in the way Donald Trump is attacked because Ron DeSantis is aligned with the agenda of the global regime in a way that Donald Trump is not. And perhaps Mike Benz has just been fooled by the kayfabe. But otherwise, he's highlighting Ron DeSantis being on the wrong side of the only issue that matters. If you are on the side of the Uniparty, the side of the global regime, that is the global evil twin. Supporting that agenda is what makes one the enemy. And so again, maybe it's all kayfabe. I learned this weekend that people are so convinced of that because there is a Q post that mentions the Freedom Caucus and the difference between the original Freedom Caucus and the Freedom Caucus as it stood at the time of that post, which was in March of 2019. So after Ron DeSantis was already out of the Congress. The post doesn't mention DeSantis, but apparently this is proof of DeSantis's goodness, which makes everything kayfabe. And as I've said from the beginning, if that's how it turns out to be, fine. But if people's interpretations aren't accurate and Ron DeSantis doesn't turn out to be kayfabe and it doesn't turn out to be a good guy, then people have simply spent the last 4 years ignoring a man who was set up by the Uniparty to be Trump's replacement. The point is that on important issues, we understand all the potential possibilities so that when new facts emerge, we are able to quickly contextualize them. We have already considered the worlds ahead, whichever option it ends up being. And of course, we're talking about a person who is directly downstream from the Bush dynasty. And Benz actually talks about the Bush dynasty in that same interview in regard to the grand geopolitical play in Ukraine that he spends at least an hour of the podcast going through. Again, it's really excellent. But he says explicitly that Trump could bring down the Bush dynasty. And then he says could bring down the Soros dynasty too, because Soros was a major investor in Halliburton. So how's that for your Uniparty, neocons? Does it still not exist? George Soros bought 2 million shares of Halliburton in 2006. That makes him like Dick Cheney's business partner. I wonder if that explains Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is now talking about starting a third party again. Why would Liz Cheney be talking about that now? And why would the mainstream media be reporting it right now? It's almost like they think the election's going to be canceled and then a new election will be scheduled. Maybe one with new primaries and everything. As you've heard me go through countless times, the global regime, when it is trying to take over nations, will always call for new elections. There have been calls for new elections in Venezuela, France, and Israel just this summer. That's the sort of thing they do when they get a result they don't like. They'll say the election was rigged and the global governing bodies are going to do something about that unless the person who supposedly rigged the elections will offer up new elections. It's weird, isn't it, that Donald Trump didn't do that with Joe Biden? But of course he didn't. This is a regime tactic. So maybe that's ahead. But the point here is that is a uniparty. That is the project of globalism. That is progress toward the new world order as described by the one and only George H.W. Bush. You got to wonder if his dad Prescott and George Soros were friends back in their old Nazi days. And hey, I know, it was just business. But have a listen to this. This is something that we've been discussing at length over the last few years as one of the problems in the current information environment. Now, as you listen, you might hear the exasperation in Mike Benz's voice. It is actually even more pronounced when you watch it on video. Mike Benz sincerely cannot believe that Shawn Ryan is asking him the questions he's asking. This is in the context of the censorship apparatus and the conflict over energy in Ukraine between the global regime and Russia.
Or supports any sort of détente with Russia after the sanctions push in the UK. And then the Trump election happened in the US in November 2016, a few months later. And the idea that this was just a sort of military operation confined to controlling the information environment all the way out in Central Eastern Europe, everything dropped out. U.S. citizens, U.S. news companies, U.S. social media platforms, we all got caught in the crossfire. And now how much is the grand Ukraine energy play worth? Is it worth the First Amendment? Is it worth having the government control the...
Why weren't they just honest?
Honest to who?
You're the only one I've heard talk about this.
Oh,
about
you should go to their YouTube channel. They talk about it more plainly than I do. This is one of the things that was so funny when I was getting involved in this in 2016, 2017, is I would be watching 8 hours worth of these censorship industry conferences.
No.
They'd be
I'm not
laced
talking
between
about-
energy conferences.
I'm not talking about the censorship. I'm talking about the gas. I'm talking about the reason we're there. I've not heard this. Everybody, it's never discussed.
Well, if you spend a minute in their world, in their own conferences, at their own meetings, I mean, you can go to their YouTube page right now. Just go to the Atlantic Council's YouTube page. Go to Globsec's YouTube page. Go to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace's YouTube page. Go to the Wilson Center's YouTube page.
Even in Putin's statements, he's not talking about the gas, is he?
He was.
He's talking about the U.S. taking Crimea for gas.
He talks about that stuff. I mean, he talks about this play of them trying to, go through with this energy diversification somewhat frequently. I feel they said that we were the ones who blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, but then I believe he told Tucker Carlson, well, because Tucker Carlson asked, hey, why don't you talk about the Nord Stream pipeline if you think we blew it up? Why don't you make your case on the world stage? And if you remember what he said the U.S. owns the propaganda apparatus. It's basically feudal. We have diplomatic communications and everyone knows what's up, but we can't compete with the media. So, what can we say?
So Shawn Ryan is a former Navy SEAL, a former CIA contractor who worked with the CIA's global response staff for almost a decade, and now he hosts the Shawn Ryan Show. He is way out ahead of normie podcasters. He is not like most of the rest of the mainstream, not Megyn Kelly or Dave Rubin or the Daily Wire guys, the Tim Pools of the world. In terms of what he actually expresses, he's also way ahead of Tucker Carlson, but he still goes through almost this entire 2.5 hour long podcast, hearing everything that Mike Benz says for seemingly the first time. Now, if his whole show is an op and all of his guests are an op, then fine. That's totally possible. And if that's the case, then they're all saying the things that they're supposed to say and they're doing a great job. And let's just put that off to the side. If that's not it, then he has terrible discernment or receives a totally polluted information stream. And if he receives a totally polluted information stream, that is also kind of a sign of terrible discernment. It's everyone's responsibility to figure out how to get good information that each of us need to properly guide our lives. But for a variety of reasons, people get steered away from looking into certain subjects, and the most common of those reasons is the cultural gatekeeping that happens, as I mentioned before. Those people are concerned with competing within the party of false decorum. They are trying to build a reputation for seriousness because they think that seriousness is prized above authenticity and open-mindedness in this new information space. That is a terribly moronic thing to think at this point. But in the party of false decorum, you get more power from the people who are above you. You have to impress them. You have to do the things that they want and that they need in order for them to pull you up. If you are trying to benefit from the system, then you're going to remain within the bounds of the system. But then there is a confounding factor for successful people, people with a lot of money, people whose life's interests are invested in that system, and they don't want to change all of that. And of course, it's among the higher end of this system that the social punishments for going against the consensus increase dramatically. People who have a lot at stake understand they're taking major risks when they violate that consensus. So it only makes sense that they are far more hesitant to do so. And because no one wants to feel like they're not actually informed, they end up ignoring entire bodies of knowledge, leaving those to the side, deeming them unserious, and just moving on. And because they're in groups of people who are all like that, it becomes immediately self-reinforcing. And as we've seen, this can go on for years. Even the people in the upper strata of our culture are virtually clueless about this stuff. They are more clueless than Shawn Ryan is. And Shawn Ryan, unless he's acting, doesn't know any of it, even as a retired Navy SEAL and former CIA contractor. Now, again, maybe it's impossible that he doesn't know these things based on that position, but I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, being an honest man who just simply doesn't know something. That's fine. There are plenty of things I don't know. But the point is that the only way this can happen is by not having an open mind and respecting those gatekeepers, and then replicating that across society. And so right now we have a situation where Shawn Ryan is just finding things out that Mike Benz has known for years and years, that we've discussed on this show for years. Virtually all of the issues and subjects that are at the center of what we discuss on Badlands Media. That stuff has been barred from the conversation. And to the extent that the answers are in those bodies of knowledge, that means that for any issues in the mainstream that intersect with issues in that body of knowledge, all the answers and all the analysis in the mainstream are wrong necessarily. To the extent that the analysis from the mainstream is ever right, it is only by accident or by virtue of the fact that information from those other bodies of knowledge has entered into the mainstream. What does it mean that so many of the most powerful people in the world in that regime structure are virtually clueless about what's happening in the world right now? Imagine controlling billion-dollar businesses and having no idea about what's ahead, thinking everything is dependent on the outcome of a fake election, not understanding that much greater global interests, quote unquote, are staked on the outcome of this situation as it evolves. And I'm not talking about the election situation. The election, relatively speaking, is nonsense. It's whether or not they can create the illusion of legitimacy, and they can't. So that issue can be bypassed and we can focus on the greater geopolitical issues, which is the information war and the economic war. At that level, what the TV says about the election and the drama that ensues is a blip. It's just one page in the Color Revolution playbook that has been playing out for years now. Some of the most powerful people in the world have ignored entire bodies of knowledge, not understanding that successfully guiding themselves through their future requires attention to those bodies of knowledge. This is at least a multi-billion-dollar problem for the world to solve, and it might be a multi-trillion-dollar problem for the world to solve. And think of a small example. Think about masks in the car. Most of us at some point over the last 4+ years now have been stopped at a traffic light and looked to one side or the other and seen a person in their car by themselves with a mask on. Now, as with Joe Biden and his 81 million real lawful American votes, none of them actually believe that masks work. They know masks don't work. They want to show themselves to be the sort of person who respects science more than everyone else respects science. That is how they intend to score social points. Some of them may still be deathly afraid of the very deadly pandemic, but to the extent that's real, they did that to themselves after having made it a priority to respect the science so hard that they convinced themselves the very deadly pandemic really was very deadly. Now, are those people doing the work of the global regime? Yes, they absolutely are, but they have absolutely no idea that they are. They're participating in something, but what they're participating in looks entirely different from their viewpoint than from the viewpoint of the people who actually know what's going on. Similarly, most people engaged in business ventures with major regime companies, NGOs, the transnational corporations who are partners of the World Economic Forum, for instance. Mike Benz actually kind of mentioned this same idea in the podcast. He was talking about the people employed by the censorship industrial complex and how ultimately it grew to over 100,000 people who would be out of work if the entire thing shut down. Think about how many businesses are like that. Government contractors who are not prepared in any way for the administrative state to be torn down. They don't think it could happen. Even if they're anti-Trump and worried about what Trump might do, they still don't believe he's actually going to tear down the whole thing. They're not out there preparing for that because they think that's crazy. They think there's no way something like that could happen. But then again, you stop at a stoplight and look to your left and someone's sitting there by themselves with a mask on. And you think, hey, I never thought I'd see that either. It's kind of a more expansive version of that old Upton Sinclair quote, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." Expand that beyond salary and add in the social aspects, the status aspects, that party of false decorum. You don't want to lose the money, but you really don't want to lose the reputation. You don't want to lose the status because that's what you've worked all this time for. That's the game. That game is what brings the money. Occasionally it works the other way around, but it's a lot harder to use money to purchase a reputation than it is to use your reputation to create money, especially as you climb toward those upper rungs of the ladder within that social status hierarchy. To paraphrase Upton Sinclair, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his reputation depends on not understanding it. That's where we are now. And because smart people want to believe that they have some understanding of everything that might come up in conversation around them, when no one's allowed to discuss certain subjects, rather than learning about them and then silencing yourself, most people who have to silence themselves will avoid learning about the subject in the first place. It's just easier that way. And because so many people operate that way, everyone is granted access to a variety of acceptable excuses that, quote unquote, everyone has agreed are acceptable excuses. Like, for instance, within the party of false decorum, there are already many people who understand that it was a terrible idea to get the vaccine. And so what they'll say now is, yeah, I knew it was a bad idea, but I needed to travel for work. Or, yeah, I knew it was a bad idea, but my grandmother is approaching the end of her life and I didn't want to put her at risk. Now, are those good reasons to have gone along with that charade? No, they are terrible reasons. But within the party of false decorum, they are acceptable excuses because people within the party of false decorum only care about the opinions of other people within the party of false decorum, especially those who are above them in social status. They will ignore all the feedback from outside the party of false decorum. So they actually have no idea what they sound like to normal people, and they have no idea how their actions might be perceived by normal people because they don't have any of that feedback. And you can take this from me because I was in Hollywood for almost 20 years and very much part of that mindset and that worldview. It's very easy to say, oh, those people, they just don't understand us. They don't understand how it is out here. And on some level, that is absolutely true. But the thing is, you have to already be committed to moral relativism to take that stance when it comes to moral issues. It's already proof that you're not abiding by an objective morality. And I want to lay that out as a preface because the focus of the awakening is finally turning to Hollywood. And that industry, I believe, is finally taking notice of the fact that it's actually been swirling the drain for a long time. I've talked about this a number of times on this podcast, and I said it to these people's faces in 2020. I could not believe that people were going along with the program because it was so obviously bullshit. And the more I saw them lying, the more I saw them posting their little paid sponsored ads on Instagram for people to mask up or to use the mail-in ballot drop boxes, the more confused and the more angry I got because I knew personally many of the people doing it. Some of them I'd been friends with for 10 years or 15 years or longer. I didn't understand why they would take such grave risks with their reputation, believing as I did that there was absolutely no chance that the truth wasn't going to come out eventually. They were essentially the spokespeople for a hate movement in order to protect their social class's permanent grip on power, and they were using the lives of normal Americans as pawns in that game while pretending to protect them. Now, I think all of that constitutes a grave and disgusting crime. They were paid, ostensibly, taxpayer money to lie to the taxpayers, to the detriment of people who don't make as much in a year of strenuous labor as they make for posting one picture on Instagram. Now, I was overly optimistic about the timing, but I still have full faith that the truth will come out. In fact, I've talked on this show before about how at some point, I think there is at least a possibility that all of everyone's data will be made fully available to the public, and the public will have to make their own determinations about what to look into. And that will create an incredible moral question within society. Are you the person to go digging on someone else when that person could just the same dig on you? And if you are going to dig, are you willing for everyone else to know your shit? I've seen that moment coming for years, and I expect someday that moment might come for me. And I'm prepared for that. And the only way that you can be prepared for that is to try to assess what it is you've actually done and seek forgiveness, most especially from God, about those things you know weren't good. And there are some things that I'm not proud of. But at the end of the day, all you can do is take account for them, make amends, seek forgiveness, and try to lead a good life. People talk about how this period is biblical. I think that is one of myriad ways that's true. And I sincerely thank God to have that opportunity. But I consider myself fortunate because while there are things I've done that I'm not proud of, there's nothing that could be used to compromise me, nothing that I wouldn't just confront. No one wants to have to do that, but you can't spend your life running from things. And so with that in mind, I want to go through the allegations of the indictment of the rapper and producer Sean Diddy Combs. I generally like to wait for these stories to develop a little bit before jumping right in on them because they are celebrity oriented, which gives these stories a heightened level of importance because there is something natural about people wanting to see big, famous, powerful people being taken down. I'm not making a judgment about that tendency. I'm just saying it is a tendency. And having spent so much time in environments that are on some level similar to the environments described, though certainly not like what's described, and I've never been to a Diddy party. In fact, I'm not even sure I've ever been at the same place he was. I can say a couple things about these environments. The first one is even in ultra-exclusive environments, there are environments within those environments that are even more ultra-exclusive. For instance, one of the bars I worked at was generally open to the public. There was no guest list, except for parties with reservations, and all types of people were welcome to come inside and enjoy themselves. Then within that venue, there were VIP tables. People would make table reservations, and they would have bottle service at their tables. Then within that, there were the really good tables. Some of those tables were cut off from other parts of the crowd. And then there was an entirely separate and private bar upstairs that was used for birthday parties or when a big band would play. That would be where the band would have their after party with their friends. And I could run through these sorts of arrangements for 50 different venues in Hollywood, everything from diners to the Staples Center. And of course, the same is true when big celebrities or wealthy people have events at their houses. That's roughly the same as it would be for any other party at a person's house. Like if someone's having a holiday party, you're not going to go down the hall exploring all the bedrooms. It's no different at a Christmas party in a small town than it is at one of these crazy parties in the Hollywood Hills that is debaucherous. At those events, there will always be areas that are exclusive within something that is already exclusive. So for a party like these Diddy parties, the way they're being described, forget about the debauchery for a moment. Any party like that, the people invited would first and foremost be the friends and special guests of the person throwing the party. Then maybe some close friends of close friends. Then there is a PR company that takes care of hosting celebrities. And of course, Diddy probably already has a PR firm in-house or on retainer. And then there will be a handful of high-end promoters or model wranglers or model agents who will supply other pretty people, various tastemakers, up-and-coming actors, musicians, models, etc. And for those Diddy parties, of course, there were a lot of quote-unquote Instagram models who are, for the most part, high-end escorts who use their Instagram pages as a portfolio or a resume. Excuse my crassness, but I used to call it the whore resume. And of course, these days, it's not even much of a secret anymore. Most of those girls just have an OnlyFans page where they just do virtual prostitution online. So let's go through those groups again. We have the very close friends of the host. We have some friends of friends. We have some famous or otherwise notable people invited by the PR team. And then you have people invited by people who were paid to invite the sorts of people whose presence would be appropriate at that party. And I myself did that job plenty of times for a great many high-end parties, though again, nothing like what's being described in this indictment. Now, I'm laying all this out so people can try to make sense of some of this stuff, because it really is a strange environment. And if we're trying to understand it, then we have to attempt at least to try to understand what interactions are like at that level. The close friends of the hosts will be invited into those exclusive spaces, and they might be welcome to bring their friends so long as their friends are cool. But everyone else at the party is generally not invited into those spaces, though anyone can be brought in. And I think I feel pretty comfortable saying that about virtually all of those social situations I was ever in that city. That's generally how it works. It's also important to understand that generally people don't stay within those exclusive spaces, within the exclusive spaces, for the entire time they're there. They'll go out and mingle, they'll do whatever, and then they'll come back to that eventually if that's where they want to be. Not everyone with access to the exclusive spaces wants to be in the exclusive spaces. And again, I'm putting all of this out there as a preface because I feel like we're going to start seeing a whole lot of what we've begun to see from this Diddy thing. This is one example of a much larger issue. And the reason it's important to understand how these things work is because when it gets to be a much larger issue, and it seems like the same story is affecting all the different people, it should not then lead you to assume that all the different people are the same. Because most people who go to these sorts of events are there to have fun and to party and to try to be more famous than they already were. These events are 100% party of false decorum opportunities for people to network, impress people who are above them in the hierarchy, and through that process, potentially gain future opportunities for as much status and material wealth they believe is required to fill that giant God-sized hole in their hearts. And again, I can speak from experience. Pretty much everyone who attends these sorts of events is like that to one degree or another, or else they stop and say hello and pay whatever respects they have to pay, and then they leave. And they make up an excuse about all the things they have to do, or they'll be honest and say, yeah, this really isn't my thing. But some people legitimately live for these sorts of opportunities. They have a sense of entitlement. They believe they should be further up on the hierarchy, and so naturally they believe their ascent should be fast-tracked. They want very badly to be famous, and they're prepared to do whatever it takes to be famous. And I used to talk about this through the Me Too period and with the Harvey Weinstein revelations. I believe it is true without a doubt that if Harvey Weinstein was a free man today and could still win a young actress an Oscar and had an open call for a film he was making, there would be thousands of young women lined up and down the streets of Hollywood waiting to audition for him. It was true at the time. It is true now. It is a transactional city. For as many women as Harvey Weinstein assaulted, and I have no doubt there were many, it wasn't a secret, there were certainly others happy to accept Harvey Weinstein's bargain, knowing their careers would take off. This is true of movie producers who have never even produced a movie. There are people in Hollywood who can just walk around saying, yeah, I'm a movie producer, and use that to leverage young actresses into sexual situations. Sometimes it's welcomed, sometimes it isn't. But the default out there is that everything is transactional. And I want to be clear that this isn't to excuse it. It is still immoral. It's just that it's not one-sided. Both sides are being immoral together. And that sort of thing out there is totally acceptable because the town is morally relativistic. Now, obviously, that doesn't include someone being forced to do something against their will. But when you're in the party of false decorum, when you are responding to that incentive and punishment structure in an environment like that, you can see how these things would go ignored. Everyone with a reputation is given the benefit of the doubt because if people are trying to rise through reputation and that person has a great reputation, you can't go around saying bad things about people with good reputations. That's going to hurt you. And unless you have direct experience, it basically just comes down to rumors and gossip. Do you believe the rumors? Do you believe the gossip? Do you investigate? Or do you just ignore it? Because, of course, it's very difficult to get a man to understand something if his social status depends on not understanding it. People then think and say things like, well, I'm sure if that really happened, the police will sort it out. Or the court said he was not guilty. Or if that really happened, then she wouldn't be dating his friend. Just whatever rationalization works. There are a number of agreed upon acceptable excuses within the party of false decorum that don't make any sense outside it, but are nonetheless totally acceptable within it. And once you give one of those excuses, and the excuse is accepted because everyone has agreed it's an acceptable excuse, well, then you just get to move on. And the unfortunate truth, by the way, is that this dynamic isn't only present in elite environments, certainly not only Hollywood, certainly not only politics, certainly not only the corporate world. Any social grouping with strong party of false decorum style incentives and punishments will end up gravitating toward this sort of permission structure. When you are deeply embedded within the party of false decorum, you don't believe there is anything outside that, certainly not anything that could matter. So you just resign yourself to believing this is how the world is. This is how the world works. Your job is to mind your own business, look out for yourself, understand that occasionally you're going to have to deal with some morally questionable people, and you just need to stay focused on yourself. I would venture to guess that this is probably a majority viewpoint in this country at this point. There are people who are quite awake and quite informed who are still very much black-pilled about this aspect of society. Dealing with morally questionable people is something you can't avoid, so you just separate business from personal. You detach yourself from any involvement in someone's private life. You have the relationship with that person that you have, and what that person does or says or thinks when you're not around is not your business and not your concern. And just as we've seen on so many of the issues involved with this American political awakening that we track, it's exceedingly easy to deny those things that you cannot prove, as though the absence of some certain standard of proof is itself a denial. You can't prove something beyond a shadow of a doubt, beyond reasonable doubt, as you would in a courtroom, and because you're not able to meet that standard, no matter the gravity of the issue you're discussing, including to the person you're discussing it with, they will find it easy to deny. If you're not able to prove it, then they are going to preference their own doubts and treat the thing you're saying as though it must not be true, because then they can ignore it. If what you're saying is true, then they would have to pay attention because that would require them to change. They've probably made decisions in their lives that are dependent on that thing you're saying not being true. And we get ourselves right back around to that Upton Sinclair quote. All the incentives are on disbelief. When people turn out to be wrong, they'll shrug and say, well, there was just no proof of that at the time, and I didn't know any better, so what was I supposed to do? Which is, of course, akin to saying that you went and got the COVID vaccine because you wanted to be able to travel. It's a way out. It's an acceptable excuse within the bounds of conversation inside the party of false decorum. Doesn't make any sense outside it, but it works in there. And the same is true of the courts, because the courts are basically the ultimate authority. If the courts have decided something, well, then it must be true, as if the decision the court makes has some bearing on what the underlying reality of the situation in reality prime actually is. Courts convict innocent people all the time, and just the same, they let guilty people go. Courts can't decide after the fact whether or not something happened. And when it comes to the big money, high-level Hollywood stuff, these people have teams of very well-connected attorneys. They have the best PR organizations in the world. They have friendships with politicians. Here's Michelle Obama talking about Harvey Weinstein, and I believe this is in 2013. Weinstein's behavior was no secret, and sitting in the background of this clip is Whoopi Goldberg, who still has her job on The View.
I want to start by thanking Harvey Weinstein for organizing this amazing day. Harvey. This is possible because of Harvey. He is a wonderful human being, a good friend, and just a powerhouse. And the fact that he and his team took the time to make this happen for all of you should say something, not about me or about this place, but about you. All right, everybody, we are here because of you.
That is reportedly the First Lady of the United States of America at that time, calling Harvey Weinstein a wonderful human being, burnishing his reputation. In the world of moral relativism, you might say, well, Harvey Weinstein, isn't he that guy who can't stop sexually assaulting women and promising to turn them into superstars if they do as he commands? Well, yes, but he also provides funds for a children's school of filmmaking, and that's considered some kind of great beneficence. Harvey Weinstein makes it possible for you to send your young children to hang out with Harvey Weinstein's friends for free. That sort of good deed evens out the bad deeds, and then it just comes down to whether or not you like Harvey when Harvey's being Harvey. So you have no direct evidence. Prominent people are saying, this guy's a good guy. Sure, he does some things in his private life that you might find distasteful, but that's business, and we've got to be able to separate business from people's private lives. Plus, those are only rumors, and the courts found him not guilty for this or that. And if there was really something there, they never would have done that. People ignore entire bodies of knowledge based on social incentives and punishments within the party of false decorum, believing that if they are wrong, it's going to be okay because everyone else was wrong too. So they will never bear any personal responsibility. They will just be one of a large group of people who were wrong. And because of that, they'll never be held accountable. They think it's impossible that the whole thing will come down together. But that's exactly what we're starting to see, and we're starting to see that across the board. If you've been listening to this show for a long time, this has been something that we've been anticipating. All the managers and agents and lawyers and publicists, all the politicians, the social media censors, and all the gatekeepers online have been trying to hold back this great wave of truth that keeps building. These people are actively resisting something inevitable. And now all of that is breaking down. And you have to understand that once it breaks, it's broken. It doesn't just go on at this same speed that we've experienced for the last 4 years. And for many people out there who have been awake for much longer than I have, maybe for decades, it doesn't just stay the same speed because everyone has access to information now. Not everyone has access to good information or all the information, but anything that can prevent people from getting the truth together at the same time is now failing spectacularly. The actor Stephen Baldwin, Alec Baldwin's brother, his daughter Haley, is now married to Justin Bieber. Bieber became a world-famous pop star at a very young age, at least in part under the tutelage of Diddy. Stephen Baldwin, for months, has been putting very strange videos on social media, talking about ghosts in the machine occasionally, People worry that he's on drugs or he's lost his mind. My impression is that he's taunting some very, very bad people. Here's a video from him that came out this weekend. In it, he's wearing a trucker hat with the logo of People magazine on it. He's sending a message. Listen.
You have heard the expression, the calm before the storm. There is always a calm before the storm, but then so is there another calm after the storm. There's a calm and then a storm and then another calm. And in that latter calm is the preparation for the next storm.
As the video ends, he tilts his chin down, showing the camera very clearly his trucker hat with the People magazine logo on it. People magazine, of course, is a celebrity gossip magazine. Stephen Baldwin was born again in 2002 and has since been considered a Jesus freak in Hollywood. Has he lost his mind? Is he on drugs? Or is he taunting very bad people? And I would say it's pretty clear that he's taunting very bad people. Now, it just so happens that Stephen Baldwin appeared on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, and that just came out as well. Strange op, I know. But here's Stephen Baldwin talking about the imminent death of Hollywood.
How much has Hollywood changed for you from then to now?
I'll answer that in a second, because I just want to compliment you. Because what you just described about yourself is you're a storyteller. You love movie. Your natural, organic instinct is movies. Why have movies impacted you so much? Because you're a storyteller. You're a creative. You hang out with your kids. You read books. You tell them stories. You play sports. Mm-hmm. You engage them with the heart stuff, because the finance isn't first in your heart. You're a creative that God's using in this way. That's just me talking. What's fascinating is down the road, you should make a plan to let that creation out, because now God's put you in a position to do it for yourself.
Well, what time's your flight back? When are you flying back? Tonight or tomorrow?
Whenever you say.
Okay, because I'm going to show you something right afterwards. Maybe I'll take you with me right afterwards, and I'll show you what I just spot. Because we're going to turn Fort Lauderdale into the Burbank of East Coast, and you'll see what we're doing with movies. We're going to be in movies for the rest of my life is what we're going to get into. We're going to produce, we're going to do storytelling.
Now, can I share something with you?
Yeah, please, go for it.
Hollywood is evil.
Tell me why.
No, just listen. I love you.
Has it always been, or is it now?
Always.
Okay.
So that means, in the spiritual aspect of it, which you pay attention to,
sure.
All these guys are building studios now. De Niro, Wahlberg, that everybody's on this tsunami wave of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. What if the technology changes? What if I can do it right in this room? What if I can make a whole movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger right here on an app? I'm being an a-hole to make a point. I've learned it's changed so much. The most important thing is the storytelling. I just, on the flight over here, literally the flight you brought me on, I watched Jerry Maguire.
One of my all-time favorites.
They don't make them like that anymore, Patrick. Why? Patrick, why? Because Hollywood controls the content. What's Hollywood about now? Wait, because I did this on Jamie Kennedy. I got in trouble. Jamie Kennedy said, "You're wrong. Hollywood is not elitist. Hollywood does not have a small club that it feeds itself, and they make Barbie and MCU, and that's it. They want the money. The machine of Hollywood wants the money, not the art, not the quality film like Jerry Maguire. They don't want that. They used to, but that generation's those great directors." That decade of those storytelling is gone. Mm-hmm. Now, I worked with a kid a couple of years ago. He said to me, "Oh, I'm editing for you, Mr. Baldwin, but I didn't waste time editing it like normal. I'm editing it so it goes right into the Netflix model."
What does that mean?
That means there's a format to which your film must be submitted to Netflix. So if you want to sell to Netflix, it can't be the format outside of that.
How different is it? Is it dramatically different?
No.
Okay.
But that's not the point. The kid's making art and telling a story as an editor, not thinking about the story.
Thinking about
Netflix.
Yeah.
So this is how the tail is wagging the dog. What's going to happen is the pendulum always swings back, my friend. So here comes Trump pretty soon. He's going to make certain corrections in America. And one of those things will be the hold that certain creatives have on the process of who gets picked, what stories go into big distribution, blah, blah. There's a hold on that. So the next time a guy like comes along with a beautiful Jerry Maguire, they're going to go, where's Barbie? Why can't the kid who's the son of the guy playing Jerry Maguire hold a Barbie? Because, we have certain paid advertisements, and if they click on the Barbie, Patrick, I'm done with that. Hollywood is going to die in the next 20 years because of that. It will, because people don't care. They're already getting right to their phone what they want. So I don't mean to be scary. I don't mean to be Nostradamus of Hollywood. I'm just simply saying what's always worked is great movies, and we're not doing that anymore.
That guy does not sound to me like he's losing his mind. He does not sound like a drug addict. He sounds like a guy who's very in tune with what's on the horizon. And he's not going hard here. He's just telling Patrick Bet-David how it is. This is just in terms of the content. This is just about the subject matter and quality of what's being produced by Hollywood. He's not even scratching the surface on the scandalous elements, on the corruption, the depravity. He's focused on the surface level here with Patrick Bet-David. And of course, his show's for a much more mainstream audience. This is a better pace, and to the extent that this is an op, and it certainly seems to be, this is probably a much easier entry point. And maybe that's what people need, because people have turned a lot of these Hollywood celebrities, whether they're actors or models or musicians, directors, writers, professional athletes, into idols. At this point, people make idols out of influencers, and they try to live their lives or present the image of living their lives in ways that portray them as being cut from the same social cloth as these celebrities, these idols. And that's going to begin falling apart. There's going to be a point at which that wave can no longer be held back. And here we are in late 2024. The vast and overwhelming majority of the people in the entertainment industry and the ancillary industries have said nothing. Many of them just kept right on working, abiding by the COVID protocols, getting vaccinated or getting a fake vaccination card, promoting terrible products and terrible beliefs and terrible politics, all for money and for social status, but presented as something that they deeply believe in and deeply care about. And it's becoming clear that they don't actually believe these things. They certainly don't act them out in their lives, and they don't actually care. They present an image of caring because seeming to care is a signifier of one's social status. Because they're so influential and so many people want to be like them, they don't actually have to be good. They just have to seem good to those people who will then follow them and be good themselves. But of course, they're not modeling goodness. They're modeling narcissism. They're modeling fraud. They're presenting a lie to the public, and that lie is about to be exposed. Over the weekend, various celebrities wiped their entire Twitter feeds. The pop stars Usher and Pink deleted their entire Twitter history. Usher came out later in the day yesterday and said that actually someone hacked his Twitter, and that's why all of the tweets were deleted. All those crazy conspiracy theorists, they don't know what they're talking about. The actress Megan Fox, who many people would recognize from the original Transformers movies, she wiped hers as well. I would suspect this is going to keep on happening. I had Perplexity AI summarize the claims made in the Diddy indictment. Here's what we have. Racketeering conspiracy. Combs is accused of leading a criminal enterprise that engaged in various illegal activities. Sex trafficking. Multiple lawsuits and the federal indictment allege Combs was involved in sex trafficking activities. Sexual assault and abuse. Several individuals, including former partners and employees, have accused Combs of sexual assault, rape, and prolonged abuse. The indictment mentions allegations of forced labor within Combs's enterprise. There are accusations of drug distribution and use, including claims that Combs drugged individuals at parties. The indictment suggests Combs and his associates attempted to shield the enterprise from law enforcement through intimidation and threats. During raids on Combs's properties, authorities reportedly found multiple firearms, including some with altered serial numbers. There are allegations that Combs attempted to bribe individuals to remain silent about incidents of abuse. and transportation for the purposes of prostitution. There's been a lot of talk about Diddy parties called freak-offs. Here are some of those claims. Combs allegedly used force and threats of force or coercion to make victims engaged in prolonged sex acts with male commercial sex workers. Combs reportedly distributed controlled substances like ketamine, ecstasy, and gamma hydroxybutyrate, that's GHB, to keep victims obedient and compliant. These events sometimes lasted multiple days and involved multiple sex workers. Combs allegedly filmed victims engaging in sex acts, sometimes without their knowledge, and used these recordings for blackmail. The indictment claims Combs would pleasure himself while watching these performances. Employees would facilitate these events by booking hotel rooms, arranging travel, and stocking supplies like drugs, baby oil, lubricant, and extra linens. Participants, including victims, would reportedly receive IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. Some of Combs's residences allegedly had sex rooms with hidden cameras to record the activities from multiple angles. These freak-offs were said to occur regularly, with some allegations suggesting they happened weekly. So that could be an enormous amount of high-level blackmail against prominent figures, not only in the entertainment industry, but also in business and in politics. Diddy was no stranger to the Obamas. Darren Beatty over at Revolver this morning asked why it was that the Obamas were so close to so many people like this. And we may get answers along those lines as the RICO element of this develops, because it's not like Diddy was doing these things alone. It's not like there wasn't a system behind that. It's not like there's not a web of people involved that crosses over into other industries. Who is protecting these people? And by the way, where's all that blackmail going? It's certainly not Diddy using it. Diddy might seem like an uber elite to us, but there are still people levels above him. People are now talking about Diddy as the Jeffrey Epstein of the entertainment world, but there was actually already one of those. His name was Hugh Hefner. And at this point, I think most people believe that the Playboy Mansion was that same sort of honey trap. They have these amazing parties. A lot of people do a lot of compromising things, believing that they're in private situations or in the exclusive place within the exclusive place. And it turns out years later that all of it was on tape. I imagine what's out so far is just beginning to scratch the surface. Stephen Baldwin in that clip mentioned Jamie Kennedy, the actor and comedian. I was actually on Jamie Kennedy's podcast in early 2021, just days before I left Los Angeles completely. And you heard Stephen Baldwin kind of needling Jamie Kennedy because he was in denial about some of what Hollywood really is. But he's good here. Check this out.
This Diddy situation will change Hollywood forever. His tentacles reach in everything to music, liquor, TV, film, reality TV, networks, brands, sports, politics. What did I leave out? Not just that. I think a lot of your heroes are going to be coming out like zeros. And you're going to find out, damn, they're weirdos. Like, I always wondered why certain people, like, got certain shots. And I'm like, are they good? Are they that good? But then I'm like, right place, right time, like this, like that. And then I'm like, and then I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe that they want the business champion them. Like, they just are pushing them. They like them. Okay, that's okay. But then I'm like, then the whole plant theory came in, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. The plant, you're put there to put out our messages, to do our bidding. That's was believable. But now, with like the do that or else I got you doing that, that's looking like, that's just not just the playbook. That's the standard operating procedure. Okay? Like that's the darkest, but then it gets even darker if you want to get into, stuff that people will start calling you a conspiracy theorist about. So yeah, here's how you can tell who is a scumbag in Hollywood. It's pretty simple. If they act like they're not. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if they are like, oh yes, and they're oh, I'm a champion, I'm an ally, I am they virtue signal, or they white knight it. Scumbags. Those are your scumbags. Like, oh yes, let me help you. Let me help you. It's like the guy that's like, that asshole, he's rude. She's a woman. Don't talk to her like that. I'll walk you home, honey. Here's a shortcut in this alley. Like, it's a joke, but you know what I mean? Like, because there's too many scumbags that act like they're good people, and there's a lot of smoke. So I want you to think of anyone who's really earnest. Anyone who's ever put this in a post, like, had a great time working with these wonderful humans. You ever see that? Humans? Yeah, you're a fucking weirdo. You're not real. No one goes to Trader Joe's and goes, man, this human in line. No, you're a fucking fraud. There's so much to say. I can't say it because I get in trouble. I have to go to Patreon. I'm not asking you to join. But you just can't be real on this. If people act extra like they're good people, they're scum. They're scum. That's all I have to tell you. And you're going to see it. What's so insane is that this Diddy shit is going to reach into so many different levels, but I think it's actually going to make people. Hollywood used to be so cool. I think people are going to go, you work in Hollywood? And the new norm will be, you're disgusting.
I think he's exactly right. Sooner or later, people are going to reach their limit on this stuff. It's weird to think of it this way, but in some sense, when we are consuming entertainment products at home, when we're watching a movie or a TV show or listening to music, we're inviting those people, in some sense, into our homes, into our lives. We are allowing what they have produced to become part of us, our consciousness and our understanding. And this is so common and so normal. And if you're not paying attention, then you don't know what these people are. Just like we separate business from someone's private life, people separate the art from the artist. And we've gone on that way for a long time, always prizing art as this special thing and understanding that sometimes these tormented souls are the ones producing the art. And the art is still great, even if the person making it wasn't all that good. And so people tell themselves, and they go by that. And I'm one of those people. Certainly not much now, but in the past, there are Woody Allen movies that I absolutely loved. I was a massive fan of the band Pearl Jam, and while I don't know anything creepy that they've ever even been accused of, aside from hanging out with Barack Obama, Eddie Vedder's politics are awful. He directs the hate movement at Trump supporters and does it from a place of being holier than thou. I find all of that reprehensible. My appreciation for their music has dropped dramatically. I no longer have any interest in seeing them in concert. And of course, I've discussed the NFL a few times. Now, if the claims against Woody Allen are true, that stuff's reprehensible. But with Pearl Jam and the NFL, I just really can't get past their politics. And I don't have any reason to try to do that anymore. Because there's other stuff that I appreciate now just as much. And I'd rather devote my time and energy and money to that. What happens when this really blows up? At some point, people will have just had enough and say, damn the whole thing. And the same will be true for these other parts of life that have skated by and for all the people who thought they were just going to ride it out. That's why Donald Trump has them losing their minds. Donald Trump, at the end of his term, pardoned a woman named Desiree Perez, who was a prominent music industry figure for over a decade. She worked closely with Jay-Z at Rock Nation. I wonder what she knows. He also pardoned a handful of rappers, Lil Wayne and Kodak Black, as well as a man named Michael Harris, who was the co-founder of Death Row Records with Suge Knight. How much do these people know, and in what ways did they participate in order to receive that pardon? And then you might remember a couple years ago, back when Kanye West was getting in trouble for talking about how Jews run the entertainment industry, it was Diddy trying to leverage him and silence him and threaten him. Kanye said back in 2018 that Donald Trump was like a father figure to him. I wonder what Kanye knows. It seems like we're close to finding out. Hollywood hasn't been flushed yet, but it is swirling the drain. I'll be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon, down on the range.